Hi, this is Dr. Stephanie Wautier, and I'm the host of Conversations with a Chiropractor. This is not a health how-to, but rather a conversation with some amazing people I've had the pleasure of being with on my journey of life. Think of it more like Tuesdays with Maury, a fireside chat, or chicken soup for the soul. Grab a cup of coffee, sit back, and enjoy this conversation with a chiropractor. Today on Conversations with a Chiropractor, I am joined by my dear friend Lana, and Lana and I love to travel. The big difference between us is that she has done so much travel by herself. So today I'm going to be picking Lana's brain about what it's like to be a solo traveler. Lon, thanks for joining us.
Hi, Steph. Thanks for having me. I'm so excited to talk about this.
Yay. So I want you to jump right in and tell me what the first trip was that you went on by yourself.
Okay. So the first trip, I'll count the first trip as one that required me to buy an airline ticket and go away from like the comfort of my car. Because I did a couple of road trips when I first moved to Colorado, but this trip that I'll share is the most memorable. And it would have been in August of 1997. So I think I was 23-ish, and I just moved to Denver and didn't really know anybody. I was working as a nanny, and I found out that I had the weekend off and wasn't expecting that. So I had maybe a 4-day weekend, and I had always wanted to go to San Francisco. My cousin, who I call Aunt, lived in Marin County across the bay, and she just was someone that I found very inspiring and incredible and talented. So I basically bought this ticket to San Francisco, and I went to the library and looked at the guidebooks on the city. Like Frommer's and Fodor's were two very popular guidebooks. And I just made a list of the things I might like to do. And I was looking at, there were a lot of food magazines at our library at that time. So it would be like Food and Wine or whatever the popular food magazines. And I would look in the San Francisco articles and make lists of places. And I only had, it was a last minute trip, so I didn't have a ton of time to plan. But so that's what I did. I flew to San Francisco and stayed at this hotel called Mosser's Victorian in the financial district. And it was affordable for me at that time and also really charming. I was just so thrilled I couldn't believe it that I bought this airline ticket and went on this trip by myself at 23-ish years old, maybe 24.
That's very cool. So you had a little bit of comfort in that your aunt lived in San Francisco, but you were basically by yourself, like flying there, finding your way to the hotel, figuring out where you wanted to stay and whether it was safe. I mean, those are big things.
Yes, and I didn't have plans with her. I think at that time, keep in mind, this is before email and texting and cell phones. And in fact, I don't think I even told her I was coming until I was there. And I was like, hey, I'm in San Francisco. What are you doing? And I just show up in this city and I was blown away at the beauty of it. I mean, I just had never seen anything like that. The architecture, you could feel the ocean in the air. You could see it from the city. And then there were all these incredible restaurants. It was just like this feast for my senses. And I also felt so grown up and worldly and excited. It's probably one of the best memories of my life.
Wow. Knowing that we grew up in such a small town and just having that adventure of being in Denver and being on your own, and then to have this next level sort of like huge quantum leap of going all by yourself on the plane. It does sound like it was exhilarating and invigorating, and it probably sort of fueled your desire to travel again.
It did. And sometimes I think about that. Like, if that trip hadn't happened, I wonder who I would be. Just a couple of highlights. If you can imagine, in this moment or in the moment that I was there was a couple of memorable aspects of that trip. One is that I did call my aunt and said I'm in San Francisco. And so we agreed that I would take the bus across the Golden Gate Bridge and meet her somewhere once I got across. And she picks me up in this forest green Alfa Romeo convertible. And this aunt of mine, she had worked in the fashion industry, and I had always been so inspired by her. And she's like beautiful and stylish. And so she picks me up in this convertible. We drive through the redwood forest, And then we stop and have lunch. I don't remember what little town in Marin County we had lunch on the water, but I'm pretty sure I had a crab cake, which was a new idea for me. And I just couldn't believe it. I just couldn't believe like you could have this life and that I could just
Mhm.
see her like that. And we just had this lovely lunch and spent the afternoon together. So that was just an incredible experience. And I still go back to San Francisco and think of that time and have such a fondness for that place. So that was one great memory. The other one was the night that I decided I would go out to the one Italian restaurant I chose in North Beach, which I think was a neighborhood with Italian roots. And I chose this restaurant, and all I remember, I had fried risotto balls. So keep in mind, I didn't know what risotto was. And then the fact that they could roll it in a ball, right? This little, almost like, how would you describe risotto, I guess, to someone who hasn't had it?
I think it's sort of like the brother or sister to rice, right?
Hmm.
Like in that realm, a little bit sticky and gooey carbohydrate.
I feel like it's a rice that presents as a pasta almost. It's starchy. And so it was this ball, almost like if you imagine a fried macaroni and cheese ball or a fritter of some sort, but it was this ball of risotto. Four came on a plate, and I was sitting there at this probably really outrageously expensive restaurant. And I had just decided I would do this one thing. I don't remember how much it cost, but I just remember getting those four little balls on my plate and thinking, well, all right then. Look at me. Look at me go with my risotto balls. That was one night in the same neighborhood, a cafe called Figaro's. Last time I was in San Francisco a few years ago, I went there. I don't even know if it's still open since the pandemic, but Figaro's is right across from the square where there's a church where Joe DiMaggio and Marilyn Monroe had gotten married. It's like a cigar shop that also served coffee like at the bar, and it felt like everybody was either old or cool in a way that you would see in a postcard, in a way that felt so like both urban and worldly and historic all at the same time. And I just remember sitting there and being like, I am having a cappuccino at this cafe and people are smoking cigars. And then another fun memory was I went out another night. I guess I remember the meals. That's true to my character now. I went out for pizza one night, and I ended up sitting next to this couple from Japan, and they were visiting their daughter who was in San Francisco for college. So it was the two of them. I was kind of sitting next to them. So I ended up talking with them for dinner. And then I ended up, when I was leaving the restaurant, I ran into some younger locals, like my age or a little older. And they said, we're going out swing dancing. Do you want to come? And I was like, sure. So I just got in a cab with these people and went out swing dancing in San Francisco. And I can't tell you how that was just like unbelievable. I still think back to how amazing that was to go out dancing with a bunch of really fun people my age. And I just went and did it. It was unreal.
I mean, this sounds like for all of these circumstances, just this is just one trip. Like you're growing yourself, you're challenging yourself. I want you to tell me specifically about because you are such a lover of food and curated experiences. Tell me again about that time where you wanted to order more food than the wait staff really allowed you to.
That's right. This wasn't that long ago. I feel like this might have been like 2017-ish. I went to Vietnam, and if you've had Vietnamese food anywhere, even just one item, you have a sense for how incredible it is. So many fresh herbs and interesting preparations and noodles and rice and vegetables and meat. So when I went to Vietnam, part of my plan was to take cooking classes and to eat assertively. One of the towns I went on is known for really incredible food, and it's also known for tailored clothing. So people go there and they might have their wedding dress made or have some clothing made. And so I went to the restaurant, I sat down and I ordered honestly what would feel kind of reasonable if I were looking to try different things. And let's say I was with a travel partner, the number of items I ordered wouldn't have been crazy, but because I was alone, the volume was inherently too much. So in this case, I tried to order like I don't know, a couple of little appetizers and a main dish, or maybe like a fish and a rice. And the server said, Mademoiselle, you cannot. And I was like, no, really, I can. I'm American. I love to eat. They're like, you cannot order it. And it's like, no, really, I am a student of food. I was trying to explain in broken English for some reason that I was a big, you know, American with a big appetite, and I always take, care not to waste food when I'm on a trip, even if ultimately I can't eat it. I'm not like, pushing food away in big piles because there in many places people don't have enough food to eat and it's pretty insulting, I think. So I'll take the food with me and try to give it away or put it in the mini fridge or somehow not waste the food. So I didn't feel like what I was doing was too much, but they literally would not allow me to order what I wanted to order. And I was really frustrated. So next to me were two men from Korea. One was named Hao. And I remember that because it was he said it in a fun way. He's like, how are you? He said, "Hey, I'm Hal. You should come sit with us and we'll order everything." So we scooted our tables together. I have a picture of this dinner. We scooted our tables together, and I'm not kidding. We probably ordered almost everything on the menu. And we were there for hours, and the server had no problem with us ordering that much food. It was just really enjoyable and fun. So thanks for reminding me. I'd forgotten about that.
Oh, that's such a fun story because I just think about usually the wait staff would want you to order as much as you could because then their tip is bigger.
The idea of exploring all of these unique dishes and flavors and specialties is a highlight for me.
Has there ever been an odd experience or a negative experience around dining alone in any country on any of the trips you've been on?
So the first one that I can think of was when I was in Venice, Italy. And this was earlier on in my travel days. I was alone and looking to have dinner in Venice. I would just find a place and go. I always have enjoyed a mom and pop kind of family owned restaurant where people are passionate about food and it's less touristy. The idea was you don't want to find a restaurant that has a menu in English, would be kind of a rule of thumb if possible. So I was walking up and down the canal facing restaurants, many of which are arguably touristy, but I was trying to have dinner at one of these restaurants and no one would seat me. So I'd come in and they would be like, "Sorry, we don't have space." And I'm looking around and I'm seeing all these tables. And then a couple would come in and they would seat the couple. It was because it was the first time it had happened, I was really genuinely confused. So what I did is I walked to the interior of the city and away from the canals, away from the restaurants that were facing sort of the more scenic parts of Venice. And I found this beautiful little Italian restaurant owned by this family where it was like there were kids running around. Like it looks like the family was running the restaurant. I got seated right away and I was eating my dinner and they asked me how I liked my trip and where I had been. And I said, "Tonight, I'm so glad I found your restaurant. This is delicious." And tonight I kept going to restaurants, but they would say there was no room for me. And then there would be all these open tables. And they said, they are confused why a young woman like yourself would be alone. Like, it's not an understanding. Like, no one understands that. And I said, "Do you think I'm like an escort or what?" And they said, "We just don't know. We don't understand it. And it doesn't look good, basically, for the restaurant to have a woman in my age sitting alone."
I do want to ask you about a destination that completely surprised you for better or for worse.
Okay, let's see. So I think Morocco is one of my favorite places I've ever been to in my whole life. And I had planned, this was a trip that I did more recently, and I had planned, I knew where I was staying. I had arranged for like a guide who also would provide transportation between the different places I was visiting. And so everything was pretty organized. So I didn't expect to have difficulties, right? I felt like I was with safe people who would transport me where I needed to go. I knew kind of what I was doing each day. Or at least for 3 days, I'm exploring Marrakesh. And then for 3 days, I'm hiking in the Atlas Mountains and enjoying hammams. I don't know if, have you heard of a hammam?
I have not.
It's basically a Moroccan sauna. So it's like a bathhouse. And it's just like if you went to a sauna or a bathhouse experience, but they have this amazing soap made out of argan oil and these scrubbing gloves that are different than anything I've seen anywhere else in the world. And so it's just like you go and you take a steam and you scrub, and there's people you could hire to do a scrub. And it's just a cool, relaxing, interesting experience. So what was amazing about Morocco was that it was the first country I'd gone to where most of the women in the country would cover their heads, wear a headscarf of some sort, or cover parts of their faces. And where it would be even more atypical for a woman to be traveling alone. Like, I don't know if a young Moroccan woman right now would be traveling alone, but traditionally it was less so the case. And so it was almost like even more obvious that I was alone. And so I chose to wear a headscarf when I was in the city and when I was in certain places like villages. Not so much like a contemporary hotel, I didn't wear a headscarf there, but if I was out in the souks, the little shops in Marrakesh, or if I was in exploring villages, I wore a head covering. I just didn't know how that was going to be. I didn't know how people would perceive me. I didn't know if people would interact with me. And every single time I met someone in a shop or in a restaurant or in a cab, they would say, "Oh, how do you like Morocco? How do you like it?" And I'd say, people have been so wonderful. It's so beautiful. The food was just out of this world. I don't even have a description for how incredible it was. But I just had these like glowing, sort of a glowing report to give to whomever. And what people would say, Stephanie, they would say, "You are welcome." Almost like as if someone says thank you and the other person says you are welcome, except what they're saying is you are welcome here in our country. And no one, it was so interesting. No one asked why I was alone. It didn't feel odd. I can't even tell you. The other thing was that I asked the hotel that I was staying at in Marrakesh, can I go out at night by myself or do I need to bring a guide or some other person? And they said, it is safe for you. And they showed me the perimeter to walk here and within this square at night. And I did. I went out at night and I'm always very cautious. And it was lovely. It was just absolutely out of this world. And so I ended up meeting people like I was in this little town called Essaouira on the coast. And there was a place where I'd had breakfast and they made these beautiful chicken pastilla, which is almost like imagine a chicken pasty with like shredded chicken and Moroccan spices almost with a maybe lighter, like a phyllo dough. And it was so delicious. I said, gosh, I really wish I could learn how to make this. And they said, come back later, we'll give you a lesson. So the woman who owned this restaurant just invited me to come back when she was making pastilla for the next day. And I spent the evening learning how to cook with her. And it was just incredible. That's how the whole trip was. People were lovely.
That is so surprising to me, but what a breath of fresh air. Like, what an absolutely amazing experience that sounds.
It was so amazing. I think it's one of those places where every single day you pinch yourself. You can't believe, like, I can't believe I just hiked this mountain. Now, in that case, Mohammed and his family have an uncle who basically hiked up the mountain. He must have been in his late 70s, early 80s. He hiked ahead of us at least 7 or so miles up this mountain with a mule and had a full picnic of hot and cold food items, many courses. And so when I arrived at the top of the mountain with my guide, his uncle was there with a full picnic on this beautiful Moroccan rug overlooking the snow-capped peaks. It was just like, it felt, I mean, part of it is that it's their family business and they do it so beautifully well. But I was not expecting that. I wasn't expecting such a warm, comfortable experience just because I don't know why. I guess I thought between a language barrier and a cultural difference and being a woman and being alone, but it was quite the opposite.
That picnic sounds quite extravagant. I mean, what I do for a picnic, throw some crackers and cheese and some fruit in a basket or a bag. I mean, that sounds quite extravagant.
So I treated myself to a couple of places that were just fancy and nice. And I haven't stayed at places like that. I think I stayed one night in Marrakesh at a really elegant hotel. They would say, Mademoiselle, where would you like to take your breakfast? And I'm thinking, well, I don't know what the choices would be, but normally it's just breakfast. I don't have an idea of where to take it. I say, well, where do you think is a good place to have breakfast? And so that was just unexpected experiences. But I did notice in Morocco, even in the more casual, like in the villages or in smaller towns and in really just small family owned, very affordable restaurants, the meals felt special and substantial. They would be like couscous or rice and meat and salads. And it was usually quite elaborate. It wasn't just like you go grab a sandwich. It was a sit down event and a lot of effort put into making things beautiful and different layers and different dishes to choose from.
Wow. I know that you have traveled, like literally not just different countries, but different continents. Would you say that there is a universal difference from some of the places you've been and the United States in terms of how rushed we are with our eating and how quickly we want to just consume our food?
Oh, there's a huge difference. I mean, my experience has been that earlier on, like in the 90s and I don't know, up to 2015 or so, it felt like many places I visited didn't have a to go option. It just wasn't a thing. So when people would be in a hurry, a lot of tourists would be coming in a hurry, they started doing like to go options. But it wasn't really a thing. So you would make time to eat and also you never had to think about am I staying too long? That didn't feel like a thing. That's the case, like I think in Europe, and also I was in Thailand and Vietnam, and in both cases, people seemed leisurely at their meals. When I go on a trip, every single time I come home and I think about that, like, why am I walking out the door with a piece of toast? What, like, why do I need like, what would happen if I didn't get a coffee to go? What if I sat down and put it in a ceramic mug and just sat for like 10 minutes? It's just so, that's a lost, I think, a lost beauty in our everyday life sometimes.
Oh,
So I
definitely.
really slow down on those trips. I really slow down and enjoy that.
Is that where you went scuba diving?
Yes, I went scuba diving in Palau and wow. I mean, there were they have these giant clams there that are big enough that once the clam dies and you have the skeleton shell, it's big enough that a tall person could sit in it as if it's an Adirondack chair, like underwater.
Oh my.
And yes, and when they were alive, they were like vibrant, like fuchsia and almost like this like metallic, I don't even know, like bright, almost these floral patterns, bright cobalt and fuchsia and gold. And it's just incredible.
It sounds incredible. Wow. Let me ask you, what would you tell a woman who wants to go on a solo travel trip, but she's a little bit nervous? What would you encourage her to do to start?
So I think, one of the unusual things about traveling alone is that you need to get used to the idea that you're not being entertained by another person. And it's particularly salient when you're sitting at dinner or at a meal at a restaurant, right? And you're by yourself. It is still sometimes weird for me. And so I usually bring a book or a journal. And honestly, sometimes I'm not really even reading the book. I just use it as like a prop so I don't feel socially awkward. I usually would journal or at least just make a list of what I did that day. For someone who hasn't done it, I would start with a mini adventure, maybe in your town or somewhere nearby that you could do a day trip. And the idea would be not so much that you're going to do a thing that you've never done, like you might go to an art festival, an hour away or go out for a meal or go see a show or something. But the idea would be just to see what does it feel like to go someplace that you want to go to all by yourself and to go and enjoy it alone and to see what it feels like to be walking through a crowd at an art festival and it's just you. And what's funny is in the beginning, it feels like everyone notices that you're alone and that it's like weird or I don't know, like eccentric. But the truth is, you're always with the people you're with. They might think that your friend or your partner is going to meet you in an hour and that you're just grabbing a quick bite or, your travel partner didn't want to go to the art show. Like there's this sort of judgment I think we hold sometimes when a person's alone as if they don't have other options, like they don't have friends or a partner to go out and explore the world. And once you get used to the idea that other people either don't care or they're impressed, usually those are the two sort of options. People will either say, like, they won't know the difference, or they'll just be like, wow, I wish I could do that. So it doesn't feel as awkward socially as you might think. But part of it is just getting comfortable. And then I would do a weekend trip. I would do like go away for 1 or 2 nights. One thing that helped me in the beginning was to have sort of an itinerary or a purpose. So, one example would be like, I'm going to go to Santa Fe, drive there, and I'm going to go to like see these art galleries. I'm going to go to the Georgia O'Keeffe Museum and try this particular famous green chili and do this one hike. And then when you get there, you could just cancel all that. You find something else to do. You could change your mind. You might not be in the mood, but it feels more comfortable when you have a plan. At least that's what I find. It feels less weird or unusual being alone when you have a plan that you can cancel or change if you want.
I like that. That's really good advice. I'll never forget the first time I went to the movies alone. I was a traveling nurse and I was so sort of nervous that I wore a baseball cap, like as if I was like in disguise. And then one of the nurses I worked with saw me and he was like with his girlfriend and he's like, "Oh, hi." And I was like, "Oh, oh, hi." Like I was like, "Oh crap, someone saw me. I wanted to be invisible."
Uh-huh.
So, I mean, I can attest to the fact that you really have to kind of practice that. You have to practice being alone and practice eating alone. Now, the funny thing is, I think that the older you get, and especially if your life is sort of chaotic with children, like anytime you're alone, it's just such like a luxury.
Right. Like
Um,
you're like that time you might treasure that, or it might just be such an unusual moment of peace, maybe that you don't reflect on, like, what does it mean that I'm alone? Because you have a whole family that you could be spending time with.
yeah. And I know you have tons of friends and family that you could be traveling with. But you're choosing this, which I think is really cool. If you were with someone and you had a full day planned, you would have to sort of ask that other person, like, oh, does that work for you? Or maybe you would have had to even cancel something else. So almost, it sounds like as a solo traveler, you have a little bit more freedom to, frankly, do whatever the heck you want and
Oh,
change the schedule. And if you want to sleep in, or if you want to come home early, or if you want to stay out late, or if you want dessert versus not dessert, like you don't have to sort of be accommodating to the other people or person that you're traveling with.
it is so incredible. In fact, the problem now is I've gotten so used to that that when I travel with people, even people I just adore, I feel a bit stifled because the part of me who's really interested in meeting people and observing like the culture or the place, like I maybe wouldn't chat with the restaurant owner or the chef. But one example of something I know I don't think I would have done was in Nicaragua. I was on this island called Little Corn Island. There's these islands, Little and Big Corn. And I went to scuba dive with the hammerheads. That was the whole point. And so during the day, I would have free time after the dives. And there was this little taco hut, and there was a woman and maybe one or two other women working there. But the owner, I feel like her name was Veronica. I went every day for lunch, probably only a couple restaurants on this island. And there was only electricity from 2 until 4 for the whole island. So everything between 2 and 4, you had to do that stuff, the things you needed electricity for. So I would go and get my tacos. Well, one day, like the third day I was there, she invited me to her birthday party.
Oh my
And
gosh.
her birthday party was a giant, like, I don't know what we ate, what was being prepared and served, but it was epic. And there was a band and there was dancing late into the night. And it was one of the most like joyous and incredible parties I've ever been to in my entire life. I felt really special that I had been invited to that party.
That is. Do you think that you have been a little bit more adept at traveling alone because you have a more extroverted personality?
Do you think that being extroverted has led to some of these scenarios? I'm definitely a chatter, so I will be talking to people all day. And again, when I'm with other friends, I feel like it's rude. So, I'm usually really interested in whatever the thing is that I'm around. Like if I'm scuba diving, I want to know, well, how long have you guys had this dive operation? And like, when did you start diving and when did you fall in love with it? And that's could be annoying you know, if you're with me, if you're my friend or my boyfriend. One time I was on a dive trip with my boyfriend and we were in Belize and we were about to dive the Blue Hole. Have you heard of it? It's basically like, I forget the appropriate term, but it's almost like an underwater canyon, but it's a huge hole. And you go like 130 or so feet deep. So you need to have some experience. You have to know how to dive safely at that depth because you can only stay down at that level for like 6 minutes or something, maybe even less. But anyways, I went with this boyfriend and I was on the dive boat waiting for everyone to come in and get settled. And I was just talking to this man, Ethan, and he was just cool and we were just talking and it was all fine. And then Alan gets on the boat and he's like, "Hey, Ethan." And I'm thinking, well, how did he meet this guy? Like, how did he already meet this guy? And he looks at him, he goes, "My girlfriend has no idea who you are because she doesn't watch TV." And he had just won Survivor. Yes. I literally didn't know who he was because I don't really watch much TV. And so he was super famous for it. He was a very likable survivor contestant from he was just a likable guy. But I didn't even know I was like talking to this pretty famous man on the boat, just chit chatting with him about diving and what does he like to do for fun. And I didn't know anything about him.
That's wonderful. He probably knew that you didn't know who he was, and he was probably even more authentically engaged because of it. That's a really cool interaction you had.
I know, isn't that great? Yeah. I would say when you're on a trip and you're just kind of open to whatever, you don't know who's going to be on a boat.
Very cool. What is next on your travel bucket list?
Dark. I'm considering like an Eastern Europe kind of almost not quite backpacking style, but like what a person over 50 would do if they wanted to have a decent night's sleep and not stay in like a backpacker hostel, but maybe more humble inns and take lots of trains and explore like Budapest and Prague and Vienna. And then the other idea is to go to Indonesia to Raja Ampat, which is one of the top destinations for diving in the world, and just go be a part of that beautiful scuba experience there.
Wow. It's so interesting to me. I mean, I feel like you've gone to so many places, and yet it seems almost infinite, right? The list of places where you can explore and travel. What did we talk about? Just having a trip planned gives you so much joy, like almost as much joy or serotonin boost as the trip itself.
It's so amazing. In fact, I don't have one planned right now. And yes, it really like you get to start thinking about like, ooh, that would be fun. Or you hear something, or you read something, or you go to your local bookstore and you start looking through travel guides and you hear people talk about what they loved. And it's just a whole new way to engage in like your everyday life. And the cool thing is that the planning doesn't really cost anything. Like going to the bookstore and talking with people or watching YouTube videos is the most affordable way to stretch out your trip. I was going to tell you the story how I got locked in a castle in Greece, but there's so many things that happen on these adventures that I would take all day to tell you.
You could tell us that one last story.
I mean, it's a fun one. So I was staying in this little village called Nafplio in the south of the Peloponnese Peninsula in Greece. And I had chosen it just because I really love the sea and ocean and I want to be on water. And there were some medieval ruins there. So I went to this little village and rented a little room. In the morning, would go and look for coffee. So there was this couple, Yorgos and Maria, who owned a pottery shop, but they also served coffee. I think in the morning, or they were sitting outside having coffee. So I started chatting with them. And Yorgos was like, Lana. He called me Lana Daiki. Lana. I think that means little Lana, which I thought was cute. So he'd call me Lana Daiki. Lana, after your adventures, come back the next morning and tell us about your day. So while I was in that village, I would go in the morning and have coffee with Yorgos and Maria. So one day I decided to explore this castle up on this hill, and the exterior of the castle wall was exposed. Like the castle itself was old enough that it was like kind of crumbling in some areas. Inside were the ruins of the castle. So I was exploring the ruins and enjoying myself and not wearing a watch like I oftentimes do. And I didn't have a cell phone. This is before those days. So next thing you know, I'm leaving and the whole castle door, the perimeter of the castle, the door is shut. Everyone's gone. I was locked in and it was dusk and I didn't have a cell phone and nobody knew where I was.
Oh my gosh, Lana.
True story. And for whatever reason, I remember what I was wearing. I had this like this knee-length skirt that was called cayenne pepper. It was this like J. Crew twill skirt. And these three strap, you know those Birkenstocks that have the three little straps? I was wearing those. Now keep in mind, that's not a good climbing a castle wall outfit.
No.
So, and I probably didn't have water or food. I just remember thinking, okay, I'm not going to die in here. This is going to be an uncomfortable night and a very funny story. And in the morning, when they come open the castle for the other tourists, it's going to be funny. And that's it. I heard these women who were walking this like path up to the castle. There's a beautiful paved path that goes in like a circle around this steep mountain. And I could hear them talking. So I started yelling over the castle wall, and all I knew how to say was good evening and help. So I'd say, Kalinita, help! Kalinita, help! And then they heard me, and we couldn't see each other, but they were like, are you okay? I was like, I am locked in this castle. So this is a true story. This is like a true story. So it's just so like I only knew how to say hello, good night, thank you, and like this is delicious or something. So they came up to wherever the wall, where like they have these big doors where the tourists will go in the morning. And then I found the lowest point of the actual like stone wall. And I'm thinking, I just have to figure out how to climb this because there were, it's like real stones. So they were different shapes and sizes. I was like, I have to be like Spider-Man. That's just not a skill of mine at all, like upper body strength. So I was trying to climb up and I couldn't really do it. So these women found a folding chair that had been used for like ticket sales for this castle entry. And one of them stood on the wooden chair. Then I think she propped up the next one. I think there were like one woman was holding the woman on the chair. The woman on the chair was standing, and then she propped up another person so she could like put her hand over the edge of the wall. And then I could see it. And I don't know how it worked out, Stephanie, but somehow I was able to grab her hand and sort of fight my way over this castle wall. So Yorgos and Maria, can you imagine? The next morning, they loved that story. And I found a jeweler in that little village and I bought this gorgeous Byzantine style ring that's really ornate with a beautiful mother of pearl. And I still wear it to this day. And the point of it is that like there are so many good people in the world, and everywhere I go, I get really lucky and meet these people. And in many cases, they've helped me when I was in a pinch. That ring is like a reminder to me that the world is a pretty incredible place and that I can go and, be in it. Like I can go places and alone and be safe in many cases. So it's awesome.
Lana, I was thinking that, like, as you're telling me, like, about you yelling and these women helping you, I thought, people are truly innately good. I love that you got a ring to remind yourself of that and remind yourself of that experience. Because what you've shared has just been so striking to show me that you have been in all of these different countries and all of these different continents. And people have been truly beautiful and lovely and wonderful to you. What an encouragement to anyone who's even considering solo travel, or just what an encouragement to all of our listeners, whether they're going to travel or not, knowing that, sometimes there's a lot of hate in our world and we see it even on our streets. And how beautiful that you've shared all these stories of traveling the world and really being met with kindness and graciousness and love. And I love that saying from Morocco, you are welcome.
It's so true. And I do think that these experiences, like traveling, especially in countries where if you only looked at the news or you only heard one or two stories about a place, you might have one opinion, right? And then you go there and you're embraced and included and it's beautiful and joyful and you have things in common with people there. It really has changed my view about humanity. And it's also just made me super grateful for the ease of coming home to my air-conditioned place. It's just brought so much good into my world.
Mhm. I love it. And hopefully our listeners are inspired to take another trip. Lon, any last thoughts that you have before we close this podcast?
Yes, actually, I think I shared this with you last night. Something that occurred to me is that the struggle or the difficulty or the challenges of traveling alone are no more than the struggle or the difficulty of traveling with a partner who might drive you crazy or have a different tempo. And so I think it's really worth taking a chance. And I think it can bring value to anyone's life. Just imagine you don't have anyone telling you what to do and you can sleep as long as you want and you can just do anything. It's so freeing. It's really worth it. It's worth the parts that feel awkward or hard. I say go for it.
I love it. And I think that you probably are really faced with you, yourself, and I, and probably it grows you in different ways than if you're traveling with someone else that you don't even consider, right?
Oh, also, you can't blame anybody. It's you, and if you didn't do it, it's on you. And if you did do it, you're like, well, all right then. It's a cool experience.
I love it. Thank you so much for being a guest, Lon, and I hope that all of our listeners have been really inspired today. I think that they will be.
Oh, thanks, Stephanie. This was really fun. Thank you.
Thank you so much for listening. If you've enjoyed this podcast, would you please rate it, review it, like, or subscribe? You can find me on social media at wautierwellness.com Dr. Stephanie Wautier on Instagram, or Wautier Wellness Chiropractic and Massage on Facebook. And I'm so curious where your next conversation will take you.